$14 for 2 pounds of ground beef. $14. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. But what if I told you that you can stretch that obscenely expensive protein into enough meatloaf to feed a lot more people? All that using an ingredient that costs less than $2 a pound. You probably think I'm full of it. Well, let me show you. And plot twist, it actually makes the meatloaf better. Germany 1946. The war is over, but the pantries, leer, empty. My mother lived through this, and like millions of other Germans, she learned a very important culinary trick. Fleischersatz, aka meat substitute. Not instead of meat, but mixed with meat to make it go further. Pretty much what the food industry does today, just with natural ingredients instead of food additives. We are also not talking vegan food here. This kind of meat substitute was long before that. The secret weapon? Lentils. Specifically, these boring, brown, depressing little discs. Why lentils? 3 reasons, and we're gonna go through them military style. Reason number 1, cost. Ground beef, even the cheap 80/20 stuff, runs you at least $6.99 a pound these days. Dried lentils, $1.99 a pound. That's at least $5 in savings. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Klaus, you're gonna ruin my meatloaf. No, they won't, and here's why. Reason number 2. Lentils are nature's little moisture grenades. See this? Compressed cellulose sponge. Completely useless in this state. But add water and watch what happens. The cellulose fibers absorb liquid, and now they are about 10 times their original size. And now it holds moisture. That's exactly what lentils do. 1 cup of dried lentils becomes 3 cups when cooked. They triple in size because they absorb a lot of water and a lot of flavor. They're like little flavor sponges. The starch molecules in lentils act as hydrocolloids, binding water through hydrogen bonds. Translation, they grab juice and don't let go. Reason number 3, lentils taste of absolutely nothing. See, boring, neutral. Like the Switzerland of legumes. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's actually perfect for our purposes. They will not hijack the flavor of the meatloaf. They're just going to bulk it up and hold moisture and flavor. Nobody at your dinner table will know you are serving them 30% lentils instead of meat. That is, unless you tell them. And you won't, will you? Alright, now that we understand why this works, let's build this thing. Today's meatloaf is going to be a 70-30 blend, 70% meat, 30% lentils. We've got our ground meat, and this being a German meatloaf, half of it is ground pork for extra savings and extra flavor. Then our cooked lentils, stale bread soaked in milk, more on that in a minute, finely chopped onions, 2 eggs for binding, smoked paprika, some garlic powder, of course salt and pepper, and then there's the secret weapon. Lard. Extra fat. Which brings us to the cheat. You know, lentils are very lean. They have virtually no fat whatsoever. When you're replacing 30% or more of your meat with lentils, you're diluting your fat content. And fat is where the flavor is. This is not negotiable. Fat equals flavor and fat equals moisture. Fat is exactly the thing you want when you bite into a meatloaf. Since we're using lean lentils, we cheat. We add fat back in. Beef tallow, lard, bacon drippings, duck fat, even clarified butter. Doesn't matter as long as it's fat. Just add roughly 2 to 3 tablespoons of pure fat per pound of lentils. This brings your fat ratio back up where it should be. Mix the fat right into the cooked lentils while they're still warm, and then the fat will coat the lentils nicely. I didn't do that when I prepped for this video because, well, I wanted to show you the fat. But now I quickly nuked this in my microwave, and I'm gonna just mix this in now. There, every lentil nicely coated. Now the bread situation I mentioned earlier. This is called panade. It's stale bread soaked in milk. You just tear it into small pieces or cut it into cubes, and then you soak it with milk. And it serves 5 purposes. 1, it's a cheap filler. Bread is cheap. Most supermarkets sell yesterday's bread for at least 50% off. 2, the milk adds moisture without being greasy. 3, the starches in the bread help to stick everything together without turning it into a rubber ball. And 4, this is important, it prevents the fairly loose proteins in the meat from turning into one of these like protein balls. That means it prevents the proteins from binding too tightly. Without that, you get a hockey puck. With it, it's something you can actually chew and enjoy. Last but not least, it avoids food waste. This bread would have gone into the trash. Onions. Already diced. I'm not gonna bore you to death with showing you how to dice an onion. But here's what matters, they need to be diced fine. Because big chunks of onion in a meatloaf turn into slime pockets. Small pieces distribute evenly and vanish into it. Also, do yourself a favor and pre-cook the onions in a little bit of fat. They won't have time to fully cook inside a meatloaf unless you overcook the meatloaf, and nobody wants little crunchy bits in a meatloaf. Time to get down to business. Meat. An egg. I have a second one handy in case I need more moisture. A good amount of black pepper. Pinch of salt. Make that 2. The pre-cooked onions. A little garlic powder. You could use fresh garlic and squeeze that in. And because I'm feeling fancy today, a little smoked paprika. The paprika isn't traditional, but it adds this little background smoky flavor to the meatloaf that makes people think you're a much better cook than you are. I won't tell if you won't. And of course, our lentils. And this is where most people screw up. Do not use a spoon or a spatula. Use your hands. Cover with a glove for easy cleanup. Your hands are the best tool you have for this, because you can feel when everything is incorporated. But, and this is critical, mix very gently. You're not kneading bread, you're not making sausage. You just want to bring everything together. Once you can't see any streak of unincorporated ingredients, stop mixing. Look at that, the lentils are already vanishing in the mixture. If you need something to vent your frustration about the grocery prices these days, may I suggest you smash that like button and hit that subscribe button too while you're at it. Your wallet will thank you and you will feel better. Before we form this, let's talk about glaze. If you don't have a barbecue sauce at hand, which I do because I just made a batch, link up here and down below, you would simply mix ketchup, mustard, a little bit of vinegar and some brown sugar together. Doesn't take more. This does not have to be gourmet, it doesn't have to be fancy. This is Depression era cooking after all, and sometimes that means embracing the humble old ketchup. Have the mix or a barbecue sauce ready for later. Of course, in a pinch you can use a store-bought barbecue sauce. I won't tell. Let me know in the comments what else you have used as a glaze for a meatloaf before. Hoisin sauce? Maybe cranberry jelly? Let me know. Now, there are 2 schools of thought on forming a meatloaf. School 1, pack it into a loaf pan. If you enjoy tough meatloaf boiled in its own juices, by all means use a loaf pan. I don't. School 2, free form on a baking sheet. That's what we're doing. Why, you ask? Aside from not steaming or boiling your meatloaf, you get a lot more surface area. That means better crust. So there's more caramelization going on and therefore more flavor. For this, I'm going back to easy cleanup mode. There. Form this gently. Shape it into a nice log. Pat it firm, but don't compress it. Remember, compression means brick, and nobody wants brick. If there's any cracks like this, you can either push them together, or if that doesn't work, you can wet your hands and that will act kind of like a glue. There, that's your loaf. Now, the glaze we talked about goes on in 2 stages. Many people would glaze this now. I would not recommend doing that. Let it form a crust first. So about halfway through the cooking process, you pull it out and glaze it. And then you can glaze it a second time shortly before the end of cooking, or you just glaze it right after cooking. Into the oven it goes. At what temperature? 350, and here's why that matters. A little bit too hot, let's say 400 or 425, and you get carbon on the outside and raw meat on the inside. Too low, let's say 275, means this thing is in bacteria party mode for way too long. 350 is the sweet spot, hot enough to cook it through in an hour, gentle enough to form a nice crust without incineration. If you have a thermometer with an oven-safe probe, use that. For everyone else, an instant read thermometer will do. You gotta check the temperature. We are not guessing here. The target temperature is 155 degrees, 68 Celsius. 160 is the USDA safe temperature. This thing will continue cooking when we pull it out. So pull it out at 155, rest it for 15 minutes, and it will have the perfectly safe 160. And you won't have a dry, overcooked meatloaf. I'm lucky in this regard. My oven comes with a built-in meat probe. It will alert me when the set temperature is reached, and it will turn off the oven. Insert this into the middle, and into the oven it goes. A little report from the core temperature front. We're at 121 right now. Time to apply the glaze. Apply a nice thick coat. Make sure you hit all the sides. Be quick about it. You don't want this to cool down. Reapply the thermometer if using. And back to the oven it goes. And yes, what you see bubbling behind me, that's the potatoes for the mash. Moment of truth. Look at the glaze, it's all caramelized and glossy. I know you want to cut into this, but do not cut it yet. I know you want to, I know it smells incredible, but if you cut into this now, all the juices are going to come out. It needs to rest 10 minutes, 15 is better, and that also brings the core temperature up to the 160 we wanted to achieve. To prevent premature temperature loss, use tinfoil, but do not tinfoil it tightly. You want steam to escape. You do not want any condensation or steam building up. So what I'm doing is make a little tint. It's open here, which means no condensation and no steaming the meatloaf any further. 10 minutes minimum. Go set the table, talk to your family, have a drink, anything but cutting that meatloaf. All right? 10 minutes later, now we can cut it. Let's do a quick temperature check. This is how much it carry overcooked, 167. So we almost overcooked it. All right. See that? That's one hell of a juicy meatloaf. No dry spots, no grease pooling, just a really nice meatloaf that cost you half of what it should have. And now, the moment we've been waiting for. Let me get all this out of the way. Silicone mat prevents slipping. A little extra glaze. Some kind of gravy would be nice, but not necessary. And here I have a little bit of mashed potato. Let's call that dinner. That's exactly what meatloaf should be. The crust nice and caramelized, the interior moist, not greasy, and the lentils, you wouldn't know unless someone told you. And this is how my grandma fed 8 people on a budget you would weep about. If you add mash and maybe some green beans, you're talking less than $4 per portion. The best thing, it tastes better than just all meat.